Jim, watch your left.
You guys can talk to me. Keep your head straight. Look over.
Hey guys, welcome back. The AK12 platform in the airsoft world, I think, has become a fairly popular item on the field. I keep seeing more and more of them. A lot of them are various brands. There's only a few options out there right now, but E&L just introduced their most recent offering. This is the E&L Essential Series AK12. They sent one of these over for me to review, so let's check it out. So how did this perform? I took it out to Nitehawk's Walk the Line event for 2022, which, as of filming this video, was exactly 1 week ago, and it was a blast. Easily one of the best games I've been to at Nitehawk. If you guys get a chance and you're in kind of the Spokane area, go check out Nitehawk Airsoft. One of the better fields I've ever played at, and it's a great community out there. So I took this out there, ran a 7.4 on it with 3.2s, and dang, it performed. I was really actually quite impressed. Stock gun, it sounded really clean. Not a ton of gear noise, it sounded very smooth. And the range and accuracy on it were impressive, to say the least. It's probably getting about 180 feet, give or take, with a .32, which is more than I really need. That kind of range on the field, 90% of the time, outranges most people's guns out there. I was shooting at people about 150 feet away in buildings through windows, and I was, with relative ease, able to make those hits in just a few BBs. So very impressive. Although the gun's rate of fire was a little bit low, it's a pretty normal motor in there, and we'll get to that in the internal section of the video later on. On a 7.4 with a Dean's 2-to-me adapter, it's getting about 10 or 11 rounds a second. Not super fast, but really it's enough to get a few BBs downrange and enough to get a hit. So I really didn't have a problem with that. Real quick, before we look at the gun in more detail, let's check out what the gun comes with. Attached to the gun will be a big plastic orange flash hider. Thankfully, this comes off very easily, and the gun does come with a metal steel black flash hider to easily install. I felt this was kind of interesting. I'm not sure why it's included. I can't really say I'm going to use it myself. It's a little green oil can. You could probably put some BBs or, I don't know, some cleaning solution or something in it. A spare 30 amp fuse. These are a little bit shorter than your standard fuses, so it was nice to get a second one of these just in case. A fairly decent instruction manual. It's not super detailed and is in quite a few languages, which is a good thing. It's a pretty general one. It covers most of the AK options in the Essential Series, and it does give you a basic breakdown of the gun, so if you do need to disassemble it and clean it for any reason, you've got that option in here. A quality assurance certificate. I actually really like this. Very few companies and suppliers and websites do this nowadays, so just proof that they tested this gun, it works, and it's at their spec. So I wish more companies would do this, just kind of a reassurance that they did actually test the gun before they shipped it out. And lastly, a 120 round mid-capacity magazine. There aren't too many AK12 magazines on the market nowadays, so getting one more of these to add to the collection is really nice. All right, now we can check out the E&L AK12. Let's start with the stock and move our way forward. The back of the stock does have a kind of rubberized, ribbed texture on it. It grips the shoulder rather well. I didn't really have any issues with that on the field, so can't really note a whole lot there. The entire stock, this is kind of a deterrent for me, does wobble quite a bit. Although when I'm playing and I'm on the field, I really don't notice it because it's against my shoulder or it's hanging via sling. It's not something that really clicks with me at all, but it's definitely noticeable when I'm picking this up and sitting in a chair and talking about it. A little farther forward are two quick detach sling points on either side. I did use a Magpul sling with this on the field, which is what I like to do with most guns. And being the gun is all steel, it does have some weight to it and it does get you over time a little bit. So I did occasionally kind of sling it from my neck, and it was really nice to have these on the stock, so definite plus. The stock itself is retractable. There's multiple positions. I usually leave it like kind of right in the middle. It's kind of my sweet spot with most retractable stocks. And on the left side of the gun, there is a button here. If you press it, you can fold the stock, and it stays in place reasonably well. I can shake it pretty well, and there's a latch that is engaged on the back that keeps it in place. So you can easily fold the stock back by hitting the latch and flipping it back. The pistol grip on the gun kind of looks almost alien in a way. It's very futuristic looking, but it's extremely ergonomic. I love the feel. It looks very strange. I can't stand the look, but just when you grip it, it feels natural and correct. It's definitely better than those like regular old Bake-like style grips. So Very, very nice. On the right side of the gun is your selector. It does have a finger shelf here, but the selector being fairly stiff, which is a good thing in my opinion, it's really tough to get it into full auto doing that. So if you want to do that, just expect it to go right down to semi. But it does have semi, safe, and full auto, no 2-round functionality. To access the hop-up, pull the charging handle back. There's your standard sliding metal hop-up under there. It's pretty nice. I didn't have any issues with it. The groupings and consistency were very good. I didn't have the hop-up walk off during usage. So pretty upgradable, pretty normal, and works well. On the top of the gun is a nearly monolithic rail, except for the part here where the handguard meets the receiver, so you've got plenty of rail space up here to mount optics, lights, lasers, whatever you want to do. If you want to remove the rear sight, it is simply held in place by a small grub screw, so very easy to remove if you want about 1.5 inches, 2 inches more of rail space back here. It is adjustable for windage and elevation. The windage is a little knob here that you pull out and twist, and the elevation is 2 buttons you press and move a slider back and forth. Now, battery installation is a little bit different on this gun. Normally with a lot of AKs, there's a button on the back of the dust cover you press and take the whole thing off. This one, being the AK12, there's a little lever here, you pull it up, pull it to the right of the gun, and the entire dust cover comes off. It isn't retained and doesn't hinge up, it comes right off. So I kind of like that. It's a little bit easier just to put that on instead of kind of having to manage the hinge as well. You got a decent amount of battery space in here. It'll hold a 7.4 without a problem for the most part. If you want to put an 11-1 on there, the normal kind of brick looking ones don't really fit that well. There's some kind of specialized 11 ones that fit in here much, much better. So look around for those. They are out there. It does have a mini type Tamiya connector here, and your 30 amp fuse is right here if you need to swap that out. Reinstallation of the dust cover is pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of lining it up. But what's really nice is the back here, the pins that actually attach to the rear of the receiver are spring-loaded and stay really, really nicely against the gun. So that does help with stability of the rail. So on the real gun, it's very, very vital. It's just like the real one. On the airsoft gun, it's not as big of a deal, but it's a good touch of realism. So if you want to mount an optic on here, you don't have to worry about it shifting point of aim. Something it is worth keeping in mind is that not all mags may fit perfectly into this mag well. You may actually need to modify the mag catch here, shave it down by either 0.2 or 0.4 millimeters. Some mags like CYMA, PTS, and LCT may not fit without the modification. The handguard is all polymer and is technically free-floated, even though it kind of clips onto the barrel and the gas piston tube here with some like metal clamps. So it is very, very solid, doesn't wobble or wiggle at all. It has rails on top, bottom, left, and right. Probably put like a vertical grip or a light on the bottom rail. The side rails, keep in mind, there are some kind of flares on the side of the handguard here, so mounting lights and lasers might be a little bit tricky. You might have to kind of mess with which ones will fit those. At the very front of the gun is a sling swivel mount. It can go either way, and you just clip your sling right onto it. Easy. The front sight has wings on either side to protect it. It is open on the top, and it is simply adjustable for elevation. Lastly, the flash hider here is pretty easy to take off. There's just a pin here to press. You might have to unscrew the grub screw in the back to pull the spring back a bit. I did have to do that as well. And then the flash hider will simply rotate off and slide forward. Underneath that are 14mm negative threads under a small adapter. And so if you want to mount your tracer, your suppressor, anything like that, you definitely have that option. All right, let's take the gun to the tech table, open it up, and see what the internals are like.
Guys, watch out. That's your Halcone members right there.
All right, I have the AK12 gearbox opened up here. We're going to check out the hop-up and barrel, the motor, and of course the gearbox last. Let's check out the hop-up and barrel first. The hop-up chamber is your standard Marui compatible sliding arm chamber. The arm itself is pretty stiff, so it'll stay in place reasonably well and shouldn't walk off when you're shooting. And it does screw directly onto the gearbox on the front there, so it is a pretty secure connection. The brass inner barrel it comes with is about 455 millimeters long, give or take a few millimeters. It is a 6.03 bore, so it's pretty typical nowadays to get a fairly tight bore barrel, but it is a standard brass barrel nonetheless. It does come with about 3 millimeters of crowning on the undersew, and it does have an O-ring about half an inch from the end or so to keep it pretty tight inside of the outer barrel. The motor the gun comes stock with is not the ELM 170 like most of the other guns that are pretty torquey, but it's their standard ferrite magnet motor ELM 120. And as usual, it uses a D-type pinion, so for any reason you need to swap it out, they are pretty easy to find. The gearbox shell is also radius just a little bit on either end of the cylinder port. At the rear of the gearbox is a quick change spring system here. We can take the spring and spring guide out. The spring guide is mostly polymer. The wings and the threading on the back are metal, but the base appears to be plastic. The spring feels like maybe an M110 or M115, give or take. It's reasonably stiff, might be up there than M120. It's really tough to tell sometimes. It is maybe a hair shorter than a standard spring, at least most springs that I tend to see, and the back section has an irregular pitch to it. Now we can go ahead and open up the gearbox shell. You can see the gun has 9mm solid bushings it uses, which is interesting. If you want, you can definitely upgrade those with bearings, make it a little bit more smooth. But in general, gearbox looks pretty good. Let me go ahead and take all the compression system out here and we can check that out first. The nozzle comes with an O-ring in there, which is really nice. I have to check the seal on that in just a second here. The tappet plate is fairly flexible, which I actually really like. Looks fine otherwise. It is a chromed cylinder, no ports, so no holes anywhere on it, so that suits the 450-ish millimeter barrel. The cylinder head is pretty plain. One O-ring. Rubber dampener is pretty normal, so nothing terribly unusual about that. The piston looks pretty typical of a lot of pistons nowadays, but thankfully it is a metal tooth piston. The piston has speed cuts on the sides, and the second to last tooth on the back of the piston has been shaved down to help prevent premature engagement. It is a polymer ported piston head, which is rather nice. It does not have bearings in the back. It is just screwed into place with a screw and a washer. The air seal without the nozzle is fantastic. It's actually perfect. You get bounce back, and I cannot push this past where it's at here without basically leaking air intentionally. With the nozzle, are at the same place. No air seal leakage. And with the nozzle extended, this one's a little bit harder to do. You get a little bit of air leakage, but it's still pretty good. If you just angle the nozzle just right, you actually still get a perfect air seal. So the compression on this gun is actually fantastic and definitely a step above most airsoft guns. Your gears are your typical cast steel gears. You do get a sector delayer chip in there. I did notice that the rate of fire is not super fast on the 11.1 with this gun, so it may or may not be necessary, but always a good idea to have one just in case. I'd say the shimming on this gun is about average. All the gears have about the same amount of play, so you could definitely throw probably like a 0.1 or 0.15 millimeter shim on any of the gears, or even maybe in a 0.2. It's hard to say without actually checking here. And you would definitely tighten the shimming up a little bit on each of these. So overall, it's not bad. The height of the gears between each other, I'd say is about average. It could definitely use some refinement. I'd probably give the shimming quality in this guy maybe like a B or B- around there. It definitely could use improvement, but I've seen much, much worse. As far as lubrication goes, which is something I actually really care about in airsoft guns, it's kind of a mixed bag. You get lubrication that's kind of in the right spots for as far as the bushings go, but the gears themselves really don't have a whole lot of grease, especially on the teeth where it's most vital. So it's kind of a half and half there. I could definitely use a little bit more lubrication on the gears for sure. The compression system as well was fairly dry. I would have liked to see a little bit more grease on these as well. Nowadays we tend to see a lot of various like micro switches, MOSFETs, and all kinds of different things, but this one uses a tried and true standard V3 trigger switch, just like the old Maruis. The trigger shuttle makes pretty good contact with the contacts there in the trigger switch itself. Something I'm very, very pleased with. But if you wanted to drop in any kind of MOSFET, this can definitely accept them because it is standardized parts. Overall, the E&L AK12 I think is a pretty solid gun, and it's at the right price point. So go check it out at your local retailer, see if they can get one for you. I don't think you guys are going to be disappointed. The internals were fairly solid. They have a few upgrades with the quick change spring, the metal tooth piston, and I found the barrel to actually rather nice. It's a brass 603, and the groupings on the field were actually really quite good. The speed being about 390 with a .2, I really liked, about 390 to 400 give or take. Like I said, I had chrono with 2.5s at the very beginning, so you can kind of get an idea from that. Overall, I gotta give this an 8 out of 10. I think E&L did a really good job. It's definitely a more budget-friendly gun if you're wanting the AK12 design. It doesn't quite have all the bells and whistles of some other options out there, but it leaves a lot of room for upgrading. So with the standard version 3 gearbox, you can drop in various MOSFETs such as Perrin, Gate, Jeftron, anything along those lines. And I think a few light upgrades like a new motor and a good shim job, and maybe some bearings if you really want to go that route, would definitely help smooth up the gun a little bit and improve your rate of fire. Good barrel and bucking, although they're all really pretty good in there, would help to tighten up groupings and improve your range just a little bit. So you've got a lot of options there. Out of the box, this is a really solid gun. I was very pleased with the performance. The rate of fire wasn't quite as high as I'd hoped, but really it gets BBs down range all the same, and it helps you conserve your rate of fire if nothing else. Really impressive gun. 8 out of 10, I think E&L did a really good job on this. Thanks for watching, and a big thanks to E&L for sending this over. I'm looking forward to checking out this more on the field and upgrading it over time, and I'm going to be reviewing their other AK that they sent me very shortly here, so keep an eye out for that video. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next review.